All right, it looks like everybody has kind of had a chance to join in, so we'll go ahead and kick things off here today. So welcome to our webinar. This is Gatsby 101, Gatsby Cloud 101. My name is Alan. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Gatsby, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Hinarosa, and we are going to we're going to chat with you a little bit about Gatsby, what Gatsby is, and how Gatsby Cloud fits into everything. And then we're going to have some demos as well for kind of explaining how Gatsby Cloud can empower your workflow. So a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started here. If you have questions, please feel free to add those to the Q&A window over here, and we'll try to answer anything during the webinar that we can. We may follow up with things, in the chat window as well, or in the Q&A window, I should say. So to start things off here, we'll kind of go through a couple of slides, some conceptual things, kind of explaining what Gatsby is. And then for our second half of the webinar, we'll kind of switch gears into demo mode, and we'll kind of see how everything fits together. So without further ado, all right, so just a couple of things about what we're going to cover in these slides here. We're going to talk about how you can sign up for a Gatsby Cloud account, which you have, most of y'all have done, I believe. We're going to talk about connecting your version control system, whether that's GitHub or Bitbucket. We're going to talk about how you build a site and how you connect a CMS to that site as well. We're going to look at preview builds that you have access to on Gatsby Cloud. We're also going to look at hosting as well, and how Gatsby Cloud helps you with that. We'll also talk about workspaces and how you can organize your work with your team if you have different sites in your organization on Gatsby Cloud. So big question, right? Why have thousands of websites chosen Gatsby? Well, we kind of break it down into 4 different categories, basically. So the first here, and these kind of go with Jamstack sites in general. The first is performance. When you're talking about building a static website, you're kind of baking in performance because there's nothing faster for a web browser than consuming just static content. And that's one of the things that Gatsby excels at. It lets you generate that static content, and Gatsby Cloud can serve that content from the edge for you from a CDN. The other thing that Gatsby is really great at is data sourcing. So we talk about pulling data from a number of sources, whether it's your favorite CMS or maybe it's an API somewhere that you need to pull data from. Gatsby has a lot of the hard stuff kind of baked in so that we handle that for you. Gatsby has a very rich ecosystem of plugins that make sourcing data from just about anywhere very straightforward for you. Next, we talk about security and scalability kind of hand in hand, because these two go together to a certain extent. Security, when you talk about static sites, they have a very low attack surface. So as opposed to a monolithic web application where you have to worry about things like SQL injection attacks and things like that, you don't have those as frequently on static sites because you're just serving static content. So that's one way that the Jamstack kind of beats out the older monolithic model of web development. And we talk about scalability as well. So when you're building your site and you're serving it from a CDN, traffic can scale much more easily than if you have everything going through like a bottleneck of a web server. So we do all of this through Gatsby, and Gatsby makes a lot of this easier for people who are building websites. The other thing is that Gatsby makes it really simple for developers and marketers or content creators to build amazing websites together. And if you've done this in the past, you know it can be a very tricky situation helping content creators and developers collaborate on templatized sites and the content that populates those templates. Gatsby, and especially Gatsby Cloud, is set up in a way that helps facilitate that, helps make it a lot easier for content creators and developers to work together. Oh, sorry, kind of going through these slides here. Yep. So We have this slide here. I know that we talk about static site generation, and static sites are super fast and they're super performant and they're very secure. One thing that I will point out is that Gatsby doesn't just offer static site generation as a rendering option. There are times where you need to have server-side rendered content. So maybe that's something like, if you have a certain authenticated experience that you need to render certain parts of your pages from a server, Gatsby supports that as well. We also have this kind of middle ground that we call deferred static rendering or deferred static generation. And what that is where you, instead of building pages at build time, you can take maybe older content, if you have a blog with like thousands of pages on it, and you can defer the build and generation of that content until it's first requested. So that helps speed up your build times on Gatsby Cloud. And it kind of gives you the best of both worlds in a lot of ways. So to summarize this, just to say that Gatsby isn't just about generating static content. We offer a number of different ways to render your content. Okay, so Gatsby Cloud, how does Gatsby Cloud fit in here? So we kind of like to break it down into maybe 4 different buckets, you might say. Gatsby Cloud helps you create, collaborate, deliver, and organize the code and content that powers your site. So we'll break this down a little bit further here. Before we proceed here, we had a quick question. Gatsby Cloud, does Gatsby Cloud work with Bitbucket Server or only Bitbucket Cloud? I think we'll follow up on that. Hinerosa, do you have an answer that?
Okay. Yeah, it's only Bitbucket Cloud right now. So we don't support the on-premise version.
Okay.
For today.
Cool. All right. And all right, so we'll kind of proceed here. Let's talk a little bit about creating sites. Now, I mentioned this before. Gatsby has this really rich ecosystem of plugins, and it makes sourcing data or interacting with third-party systems super straightforward. And what these plugins do is they've encapsulated certain functionality. They've solved programming problems so that you don't have to. So instead of having to write out your own solution to something, you can take advantage of this reusable code in these plugins. Makes it very easy to connect to a CMS or a third-party system where you want to integrate data from on your website. We make it very easy to create your site. We talked about this before too, but collaboration is streamlined on Gatsby Cloud because we help developers and marketers work together. So the people who are editing the content and creating the content on your CMS, they have a staging environment where they can preview all of the content changes that they are making. And that's just automatically part of your site on Gatsby Cloud. We talk about delivery, right? When you build your site on Gatsby Cloud and you deploy it through us, it is on an edge network. It's super fast. We have global points of presence, and it's secure and it's scalable as well. And lastly, we talk about organizing your work. So it's not just about having one site. Maybe you're part of an organization that has lots of different sites. You work with lots of different clients, perhaps. We make it very easy to organize all of that work in a way that makes sense so that you can manage lots of sites with your team members very easily. Okay, so I think that sums up our slides here. Is that right, Hinerosa?
Yeah, pretty much. So basically everything you just talked about in the slides is what I'll show in a demo. So thank you for setting that up. And
oh, sure thing.
Yeah.
So let me stop sharing my screen and then I'll give you control. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank
okay,
you.
Cool.
All right, so let me share my screen. So just validating, you can see my screen. I'm showing gatsbyjs.com.
Yep, I see it. Yep.
Okay, cool. So basically what I'm going to do now is show you basically everything what Alan just talked about. So first and foremost, when you have a Gatsby project and you want to deploy it to Gatsby Cloud, the first thing you need to do is set up an account. So you just go to gatsbyjs.com and click sign up for free. You fill in these pieces of information here. And then I'm going to show you what to expect next. I already have an account, so I just don't want to keep creating one. But basically, you would, after you put in your credentials, you would select your VCS provider. The screenshot shows GitHub and GitLab, but we also now have Bitbucket, just Bitbucket Cloud for now. You can also sign up using your single sign-on provider and even Google. So any of those systems that you have in-house, you can use to sign up for Gatsby Cloud. Then after you choose those things, typically most of our customers use GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket. What will happen next is you would be asked to provide permissions. You authorize Gatsby Cloud to access your repository. And then when you say authorize here, you could also tell Gatsby Cloud to access multiple repositories or just one. But that's what you would expect. And in this whole process also, you are going to choose the type of service or the level of service. I mean, we start with a free plan, and then there's professional, and then there's the enterprise plan. So typically, if you're new, you just started, you're going to be on a professional plan for 14 days. That's a paid plan, but you're going to get a free trial. So that's the first thing you're going to do. After you sign up, you're going to get, so I'm going to sign out just so after you sign up, you're going to be asked to log in with whatever credentials you use. So if it was GitHub, you do log in with GitHub. And what will happen is you're going to get a blank workspace. So Alan spoke about workspaces. So what workspaces are really is sort of like a collection of sites. So when you sign up, you're gonna see this view where you have to create your own workspace. So you just create your workspace. You put a name, and yeah, here I misspoke. You're gonna pick a plan here, so I'm just do free for now, and then you create your workspace. So after you create your workspace, you're gonna have a view like this. Then the next thing you do is add a site. So then, since in the beginning, remember we authorized your VCS provider to access your site, to access your your code. Then now you choose which organization you'd like Gatsby to access. I have many, so I'm just going to choose my own personal one. And I'm going to search a repo. Like here, I have one that's running on Sanity, which is one of the content management systems that we provide. So I'm just gonna, you can change the site name, the production branch, I want to use this one, and then the root folder. This Gatsby root folder is the folder where you have the Gatsby-config file stored. Mine in my Sanity setup, it's stored in a folder called web. And then what happens then, Gatsby will look for any environment variables that you have in your repository. Since we don't, really upload environment variables for Sanity anyway, you would set it up. You would just add your environment variables manually. So you can do a bulk add where you copy all your variables and paste. So I'm going to do that. You also may have a preview variable. So a lot of times my customers forget to add that. So I'm just going to add that here as well. And after that, you just save, and then next is build site. So that's pretty much it. So at this time, Gatsby then will start, the process of building your site. So it'll be a cold build. So however long it takes the first time, that's how long it'll take. So depending how big your site is, it could be a minute to 10. So that's the process of setting it up. So the next thing is, now let's say you have your sites built. So I'm going to go to this site that is already built. This is a site that is using Contentful as my CMS. So the next thing you do is, start, deploying and whatnot. So when you first build your site, there are certain things just to, I want to make sure you're aware of. First and foremost, you have these webhooks here. Sometimes I know a lot of you would like to trigger builds, maybe programmatically. So you can use this build webhook to, create a script so that maybe you're doing some tests and whatnot. You can use a build webhook to trigger a build. But by default, if you're running your site on any of the VCS providers that we support, so that's Bitbucket, GitLab, GitHub, whenever you do a commit into those repositories, Gatsby Cloud will automatically build. But you can also control that again through the webhook, or in the build setting, you can just disable this, enable. If you disable this checkbox, then you would have to manually do a build, meaning, and I'll show you what that would look like. But basically, you'll tell Gatsby Cloud to publish things by clicking on a button. So those are the things that's for build and previews. Now, one thing that you have in Gatsby Cloud is notification. So this is very useful, especially when your builds are maybe longer than 2 minutes and you don't want to just sit there and watch it build. You can get notified via Slack or email, or that builds are succeeded or failed, or pull requests. So that's available to you. And the last thing I want to point out also is that you have ability to control who sees the previews and the staging builds. So this is very useful, especially if you're like adding maybe a new section to the website that you don't want public. So you just want like preview builds or staging builds. You can add a password protection or a login so that other users, it's not available to the world, so to speak. So those are things to be aware of. Now what I'm going to do is focus on the developer workflow. I think because Alan just mentioned, Gatsby Cloud is really good for, a developer and a content creator. So I'm going to go through those two workflows right now. The first one is the developer workflow. First and foremost is you would notice here that I have a bunch of pull request builds. That's what I was referring to as preview builds. When you create a pull request in your VCS, Gatsby Cloud can show what those pull requests look like. And what's nice about that is you can look at that pull request and compare it to production. These pull requests, again, as I mentioned earlier, can be behind a access control mechanism like a login or password protection. So again, this will not be available to the outside world, so to speak. So this is really nice. Again, if you're developing, you want to see like what things look like, you could do it here. So that's one thing. And then if, let's say, as you are looking at these pull requests and you say, hey, this one is good, looks great, let's merge it. You can easily merge it again with your workflow that you normally do. If you're in GitHub, GitLab, you typically do your merges in your GitHub provider, for example. So here I'm showing you my pull requests, which is reflected on Gatsby Cloud. I could merge this. So you can merge this pull request, and what will happen is Gatsby Cloud will update the production site with that pull request. So that's a great workflow. Again, it just follows what you do normally, so we're just sort of, we're following your workflow. We're trying to make you more productive. So the other instance too that I see a lot is, let's say, okay, you merged the pull request, but then your executives say, hey, you know what, your latest changes isn't something we changed our strategy. We want we want to revert to a previous build, previous production. Can Can we go back? So fortunately, the answer is yes. So in Gatsby Cloud, if you look at your production history, you can easily go back to a previous build. So I can go back as far, a couple months, maybe a month ago. And, there's this publish button. If I click on publish, it will go back to this previous build. So easily able to revert. And that's a nice thing. So that is the developer workflow. Again, we're trying to just enhance your workflow. We're not changing how you do things. You do your normal workflow and things are very integrated. So now what I'd like to focus on now is the other workflow, that of the content creators workflow. So in that scenario, I'm going to be working directly in the CMS, which is, in this case, is Contentful. You'll see that as a content creator, I won't need to write any line of Gatsby or React code. I'll be working strictly in my CMS, which is the place where I do all of my work. In terms of what we're going to be looking at, we're going to be looking at this site here. This is like a recipe site. And as you can see here, there is one card that was mistakenly published that shouldn't be out there. It doesn't have any content. So, you in a panic are like, okay, I got to fix this, it's out in the world. So then basically I would just go to my Contentful setup. And this is the world I live in. This is where I create my content. So what we offer with Gatsby and Gatsby Cloud is the ability for you to preview your content. You can see here there's an open preview button, and I actually have my preview already open. But basically, you can see your changes before you publish it. And you're in preview mode because of the URL that you see the preview up there. And you also see this icon here. So let's go ahead and fix this page. Let me just make sure I have my content here. Let's see my notes. Let me just put some gemelli pasta is the best. Let's just say that's the new content. And now I'm going to change my image to make sure it's the right one. So this is the right image. Now, again, you want to make sure this is the right, this looks good. So let's actually check a preview here. And you can see that Gatsby is going to start creating a preview here. Again, okay, new preview. You saw that I refreshed. That was my bad, but you saw in a split second, it says new preview available. Click here. So yeah, so as a content creator, I could just check, okay, oh yeah, this looks good. The image looks good. But you know what? I want to make sure my team is happy. I copy my link, share it with my team. They all look at it. Things look good. Let's publish this. So I click publish and we're done. So basically, as a content creator, we stayed in our workspace, which is here in this is the CMS. We didn't have to go to write any code. And let's actually look at what happened in Gatsby Cloud. Okay, I believe this is the new one. Let's check it. There you go. So we have our new content. It was published, again, very quick. The nice thing as well is that Gatsby, the framework, does incremental build. So if I look at the logs, it shows me that only one entry in Contentful was created and updated, which is we just did at one entry. And so Gatsby just builds at one. So as you saw, the build was very fast, 7 seconds. So because of incremental builds, things got updated very quickly. The other thing is that also Alan spoke about our 2 rendering modes that were introduced in Gatsby 4. That's deferred static generation and server-side rendering. So this demo has those 2 capabilities. So I'll show you an example of what that would look like in a real site. So the blogs page here it has deferred static generation enabled. And what that looks like is basically all the blogs that are older than June 25. So anything here from my fourth post to the bottom is deferred. And so if I click on the first one, you notice it's not showing me the page right away. Actually, we're kind of waiting longer than I expected. But what's happening is that Gatsby is fetching the content. Let's see, I'm going to open it in a new tab. There it is. So you notice it took a while for it to render, but again, that's by design. But I clicked it again. After it renders, it's cached, so then it's fast. But the point is, we don't want this page to build during build times. Then your builds are much faster. And you choose the DSG strategically. You choose it on content that's not accessed that often. So that's why you would choose DSG, or deferred static generation. The other piece is server-side rendering. So this page also has that in this URL where it says new. This section of the site actually calls an API, and then it's a recipe API, and then displays it on the server side. So if I click on new again, you would see a different recipe. So that's just an example of server-side rendering. The way I see customers use it is for access like real-time data, maybe for the weather, or if you want to do personalization, you want to access or give customers certain content based on where they're located. So you ask them to enter their zip code or maybe track their location, and then you would serve them specific content. So again, this is server-side rendering, so Gatsby's accessing content, dynamically. So that's an example of the two modes. So that ends the demo portion. So just to recap, Alan gave an introduction. We looked at signing up, setting up a workspace for collaboration, and then we set up a site. I went through a workflow for developers, and then we looked at previews with content marketers. So that's pretty much a very Gatsby 101 session. That's it for me, Alan. So I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great walkthrough of all of the different rendering features that we have available. And I couldn't believe the build and deploy time for those changes with the incremental builds. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, very quick.
Super quick. Well, so that's going to be our webinar for today. I appreciate everybody coming out. We can probably stick around for a few minutes here to answer any questions. It doesn't look like there's anything in our Q&A window, but we will stick around just for a minute here. But otherwise, this just a couple housekeeping items here at the end. This webinar has been recorded. You're going to get an email that has a link to it after the recording. It comes out a couple of days to a week later. We send it out to get captioned so that it's accessible for everybody. So it'll be just a few days before you get that email. But you will have access to this recording going forward. And I think that's it. So I don't see any other questions coming in our Q&A window. So we will probably go ahead and end our webinar.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what you guys build. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks.
See you.
Bye.